Welcome to the Lifestyle CEO, a community designed for women looking to take their life into their own hands and redefine what success looks like for them.
I'm Katie, a clinical psychologist and couples therapist. I'm passionate about connecting you with the tools you need to create the life and relationship you want.
And I'm Christina, a marketing and business expert who has built her life around giving herself and those around her the ability to choose what their lifestyle looks like for them.
Together, we have created the podcast for women just like us who are looking to redefine what success looks like for them and enjoy a lifestyle that they love.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Another episode being filmed from different sides of the world. Isn't
Yes,
that
good.
amazing?
I was just about to say good morning to you because I'm here with my coffee because it's early morning in Australia, but it's late night in the UK. So
Late
good
night in the
evening.
UK. So I've got my water. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, it's been really interesting being back in the UK. Obviously, I kind of am mainly in the marketing world over here. And a lot of stuff kicked off in the marketing press, but mainly some of the national press as well, because obviously a lot of people are doing like return to office mandates. And
Yes.
it's really interesting being back in the thick of it because,
Mhm.
I mean, obviously the news I see is very much UK-based businesses, but I'm sure it's happening all over the world. Obviously Amazon being an example from last year. But yeah, and I think just living back in the UK and really experiencing that kind of 9 to 5 culture and just the pressure it puts on people to, it is insane. Like I feel like I haven't really been in a 9 to 5 job since, well, I guess how old? Well, about 8 years, I guess. But obviously then
Just ask how old you were.
I was going to say how old am I, but then I was like, wait, how old is formation? But yeah, so like 8 years, and I think it's just been very interesting coming back to it. And then obviously seeing companies kind of forcing people to come into the office 4 or 5 days a week and just looking into actually how much pressure that puts on people, especially women. It's just so fascinating to me that this is still happening in this day and age, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting. So during COVID, I think, obviously initially we saw a lot of challenges for women in the workplace, and there was actually a mass exodus from the workplace. And obviously a large amount of that was due to lockdown and children being schooled at home, and really that mental load falling on women in the home and taking care of childcare arrangements. So we did see that max exodus, but then we saw women come back to the workplace, and we saw a lot of positive shifts for women around flexibility and really their ability to manage both their private and work life in a way that was much more achievable for them, that was much more enjoyable for them. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, now we're starting to see some of these shifts back the other way, where it's becoming, mandated to go back in the workplace full time for many people.
Yeah, and I mean, there is so many interesting arguments to and fro, like before and against, and there's so many different ways that companies are trying to approach it. And I do understand, like, it is a really tricky thing to navigate, both for employees and employers, because there is a certain level of trust that goes into employees that work from home, and I'm obviously not suggesting that people aren't able to be like responsible, but there are, I'm sure, people that take that, for granted or whatever, and, maybe don't fulfill their roles. But I'm sure those would be weeded out pretty quickly anyway. But then I think there's a really interesting conversation I saw, especially around women, about how this working from home movement is actually further removing women from the right seats at the right tables and the right networks. And I do really agree with that, to be honest. I think, traditionally this has been a real issue for women, especially when they get to like childbearing age, where they have to take a step back from their career and they tend to then be looked over for promotions, blah, blah, blah. And obviously, the more they're then removed from the workplace even more, the less likely they are to be sort of recognized in building the networks and things that we do unfortunately need to proceed. And I just think there must be a different way to ensure people and women or whoever are still getting those opportunities, but that it's not forcing them into a structure that they just cannot live by anymore. Like the amount of pressure we have on ourselves to do all of these things in life, we can't kind of fit into this 9 to 5 structure anymore, I don't think.
Absolutely. And you raise a really important point there because there are benefits to being physically located in a workplace. And, another benefit I can see is also that connection, can be really important in terms of not feeling isolated, being connected with peers, the creativity that comes with that. And of course, all those considerations that you raised in terms of the workplace itself. But I think the key here is that, we go too far to one extreme. So it is about creating systems that allow for individual circumstances and individual needs and create and allow flexibility within that. Because
Mm,
when we're talking about this from the workplace's perspective, obviously the goal is productivity,
yeah,
is to making sure that we're still maintaining work productivity. That's really important. But it is about, do we have the systems to support that? And of course, you raise the point of, are people doing what they're supposed to be doing? So there's that trust element. But when you have the right systems in place and when you're not focused on just the hours someone's doing versus the output,
yeah,
so you're
yeah,
not
for
so
sure.
worried about trying to monitor every minute down to the
Mm,
second of like what key tasks they're doing, and you can more focus on the output. If that output is achieved, then we can enable more flexibility in the way that that is achieved and have more balance between those tasks that do need to be achieved face to face and those that don't.
for sure. Yeah, and I think again, it kind of comes back to what we always talk about, which is being able to design a life on your terms. And that doesn't actually have to be about starting your own business, although obviously it makes things a lot easier. It is about sort of deciding what works for you and then perhaps
Mhm.
having a conversation with your employer and, both coming to an agreement about what needs to be achieved within it, but actually managing to set that structure in a way that suits both of you. And I think I'm hoping that, perhaps employers are just more open to those conversations now. I certainly think people are putting very interesting like benefit packages together, policies together to support pet people, perhaps doing different structure in the working day. So although you have to
Mhm.
be in the office a certain amount of week, you can do it within core hours or something. Like there is a lot of there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And I just don't think it needs to be a one size fits all for sure. Because again, if you do work in production or in a factory, then yes, outputs are really important. And the more time you put in, you tend to have more outputs. But actually, we're not in that industrial era anymore where that is the case for most businesses. Most people are working a desk job where number of hours doesn't necessarily equal more productive. In fact, it probably comes down a lot the more
That's
hours you do. Um, so it's just taking a look at that and maybe kind of updating our society for this new way of working where we're kind of more in the technological revolution or whatever. So yeah, and I just think it's interesting about just looking at the ways different companies are approaching this now, especially post COVID. And I just think it just brings up so many interesting conversations that people need to be having.
absolutely. And I think the key that you're raising there is like really understanding that individual person and the way that they
Mm,
work best. Because if we are looking to achieve higher productivity, we all have we're all more productive at different times in the day, for
for
example. So,
sure.
if you're a morning person versus if you're a late night person. So some people work best late at night and some
Mm,
people work best early in the morning. And also in terms of lifestyle, sometimes, what works best for one person doesn't work well for another person. So it is about, I think the more that we can give people flexibility, and then obviously from the workplace perspective, with having those systems in place to make sure that productivity or those goals are achieved, we actually enable them to work in a way that's more productive for them
mm,
and for the workplace.
for sure. And I think, this is why I've always really enjoyed working with freelancers. Obviously, this was something I've had as my kind of vision even before COVID, but I just felt like there was a way to kind of give freelancers access to some of those cultural benefits from an office by making a bit more of a community, but still giving them the autonomy, the
Mhm.
flexibility, whatever they needed to make sure they can do their best work, but also have, a life that actually worked for them as well. And I mean, it's obviously the answer isn't for everyone to go freelance, but definitely taking some of the learnings of like freelancers tend to be very self kind of driven anyway. So they're very good at achieving their goals, being organized. And it's sort of like looking at those skills and like how can we replicate those systems in a workplace where people are obviously employed, but like what skills do people need to do a good job managing their life? I think that's maybe one of the key skills that we need to look for when we're employing people as well, rather than just like what skills can you bring to the job role, for example.
I love that. Oh my gosh, what's happening to my voice right now? I feel like I'm losing my voice. Sorry about that, guys. I'm very croaky here, so hopefully
Next
that's
advice.
hitting the spot for you. But I love what you're talking about because it's really about the idea of bringing the learnings that we have from when it is working and applying that to the workplace. I
Mm.
think also we do need to recognize that, as you said, when we're talking about freelancers, that there's a high level of self-motivation. There's a certain personality type, I would say,
Yeah.
for
Mm.
someone who has their own business or who, is striving towards achieving particular goals that may not be everyone in a workplace setting. So it is about recognizing that, if we do have work for home, some people will need really key organization systems in place, for example, to help them
Check-ins, yeah.
get organized. For some people, they will need, more check-ins on task achievement or progress, whereas other people won't need that. And I think the issue comes in with bigger organizations when we try and adopt a policy for everyone rather than looking at what does this individual need, and it's the
Mm.
same when we come down to a work plan. Like we're tailoring that to an individual. So it's really about, how do we support this individual to meet their work and their life goals,
Mm.
but
I love
also, like,
that.
how do we keep them on track? So is this someone who is highly motivated, who is highly organized, who has the color-coded calendar system for themselves? They don't need another layer of organization. Yeah,
Yeah.
they might need something else, but for that person, maybe they need some help with setting that up, and
Mm.
getting themselves into a structure for working from home. But I think the issue lies with when we sort of say, "Everyone needs this," or
Mm.
"This is the process
Yeah.
for everyone." It's about how do we create systems that enable flexibility, systems that
Mm.
can give us those checks and balances, but also allow us to, cater to the individual needs.
Yeah, I really like that actually, and I do think that's the world we're moving into now. It's so much more. You can't just have a one size fits all policy or one size fits all benefit system because one, you have so many different people within the workforce, right? And also, I mean, you always had that, but now more than ever, I think there's more niches that are required in terms of what do people actually need from their day to day kind of flexibility. Um, And I guess it is, it seems like a big task, I guess, for like whoever, like an HR director or something to take an individual and look at sort of doing that for each person. But I think there can be, yeah, like you say, like systems around it and then working with that individual. And then I feel like that would increase talent retention, talent acquisition. Like you would just feel much more fulfilled in your job because people are actually listening to what you want from your life, not just what they want from you in your job. And I do think that's the sort of stuff we'll probably start seeing, I hope,
I think we
about
overcomplicate that too, though. When we talk about
mm,
individualized, everyone kind of freaks out. It's like,
mm,
oh, in an organizational perspective, I've got 1,000 employees. I've got to develop an individual plan for everyone. And
mm,
it's not really about that. It's about saying, okay, we have these systems for the organization. Let's have like a 1 hour meeting about does that system work for this individual? How do we adapt things? How do we increase productivity at this individual level? How do we meet the individual needs? It's actually not that hard. Like we
mm.
totally
No.
overcomplicate these things because
Mm,
when you work with someone, you know them, right? Like even if you haven't studied personality types or you don't understand
yeah.
even that those terms, you sort of know in your team which are the people that you need to check in on more, which are the people that you can kind of, have an overarching goal and they will develop their own work plan for that.
Mm,
So you kind of, I think you know more than you think you know about
yeah.
developing an individual plan. I think we sometimes those decisions are driven by fear as opposed to reality.
Mm. Yeah, I actually love that. And I just think it's been such an interesting thing to look at over the last, well, however many years since COVID. And I think companies it's really interesting looking at the companies who are announcing these like return to work and like what type of companies they are. versus, the smaller startups and how they're approaching it. And it's always like this, where I guess they can be a bit more agile. But I just love looking at the different policies. It sounds like I spend my whole life looking at HR policies. I don't.
You probably do. This is the thing you do in your downtime, isn't it, Christina? Read HR policies.
The whole point is like, I think there's so many benefits of working in an office and having colleagues you go to work with every day. Like my fondest memories of working in an office and having that, like I've had still got some of the best friends from when I used to work for a company, and like I just love that social aspect. And there's so many benefits to it basically. And I think the gap between being a sort of standalone freelancer and working in an office, there's this kind of chasm of missing cultural aspects basically, which is again where one of the gaps that can be filled. It's like actually finding a community that you can maybe be a part of, or just being a bit more, so it's sort of taking the best of both worlds and finding something that's in the middle basically, of like between working on your own or setting up your own company and working for a corporate or whatever. And I just love that there is sort of things like this popping up all over the place, that just kind of, again, it's giving people a bit more flexibility to choose what aspects they want for their life and design it around their terms.
Mm-hmm. And I think, we've got to raise like the important point for women here, which is the mental load. Women carry an enormous mental load in life, and there is research to back that. So it's not just a blanket statement that we're making that women carry this mental load. There's research that supports that women generally carry the mental load in a relationship. So whether that be that you have children or not, women tend to do more of the organizational tasks, the emotional load tasks. And essentially, we're thinking about work terms of the project managers at home. So when we have these enormous shifts, they do impact women far more than they do impact men, because we're talking, I think, last time about the idea of transitions, and even just that transition, there's a whole bunch of steps that needs to be managed in terms of childcare and household duties and how that will shift. And that all falls to the woman, generally, not saying in all relationships, but generally it will fall to the woman or women in the household. So I think when we're thinking about these things, we do really need to consider the impact that it will have on women and the skills that we may lose in our workplace if we can't build systems that allow that flexibility and allow women to really, work in ways that work for them and their individual setting. And I think sometimes we can jump to quick fix solutions. So I did see, something I was reading about some of this was around, we need to have childcare in the workplace, was like, the big answer, and having childcare in the workplace. I'm like, okay, that's great, but that's for the first however many years, and then we go into kinder, or what do you call kindergarten?
Nursery or reception,
or into school. So what happens when we have school-aged children? And even with childcare arrangements, like some people prefer not to put their children in childcare. So there's a whole bunch of things that you get oversimplified, and I think it is about recognizing that women are great organisers. This is why they carry the mental load, unfortunately. But the flip side of that is that they are really good at knowing their own situations, knowing how to manage it, knowing how to get the best out of themselves and those around them. So we need to have those opportunities for women to be able to work in ways that work for them and their families. And sometimes that, that is going to look very different for every person. So, and even it changes over time. I know myself right now, if I was working in a traditional workplace setting, a key time I would really need once Archie starts kinder is to be there around that kinder time. And it's not just the kinder drop-off. So, we're going through a bit of separation anxiety. So there's a high emotional load for me around those drop-offs. And if I was then forced to jump straight into work, going from that, driving straight in and jumping into a meeting, or for me, therapy, which I just wouldn't do, wouldn't be able to be present
God,
enough.
can you imagine?
It's just not effective. So it's much better for me to get up. Well, I do get up earlier, do an hour before the kids are up, and then go in an hour later. You would get much higher productivity levels from me than you would forcing me to go in that first hour, because that first hour I'm going to be switched off.
Mm.
That's the reality, is that we can create set times around things, but you can't force people into a productivity state if they're not
Mm.
there. If they're coming from something else and they need some time to transition, that's gonna happen no matter what you do, no matter what time you get them to clock on. So you're sort of better actually to allow them that flexibility to say, "Hey, this is what works for me. I can get up, I can do this hour before I come in, and I'll be in an hour later, but when I'm there and I'm present and I'm ready
Mm.
to go."
Mm. I really like that actually. And I think there's a big piece there, which again comes back to the individual about really understanding themselves. And I
Mhm.
don't think we necessarily give people the time to figure that out as well. We kind of
Mm.
tell people what they should do. And then
Yes.
you either feel incredibly stressed because you can't do that, or you're kind of running, on just trying to keep up with everything, all the demands, and then eventually just become burnt out anyway. And I really like that idea of just being able to say, what do you really need? And like, how can we make this work around what your schedule is? And it's not like, oh, well, I want to stay up to 1 a.m. gaming. So, or what, I mean, it could be, I guess,
But
but
it might be, and that's also okay. Like, I
yeah,
think that we have to accept that this isn't just like, I think
it's
that
very
we can
hard.
oversimplify things and it's just about childcare, but it's not. It's about
No.
lifestyle choices. It is about,
Mm,
if that person what's important to that person is walking their dog at a certain time
yeah.
or watching live music at night or getting to the
Yeah.
gym. All those things are important and all those things contribute to productivity because when we are at our best, that's obviously when we do our best work.
Mm. And I think it's also about really understanding what they're supposed to be doing within their job. It's not about you're getting paid for this many hours. It's like, this is what we expect from you. And if you can do that in 2 hours, like I have freelancers who can do the most incredible amount of work in the shortest space of time. And I'm not saying, well, I'm paying you per hour. Like, I'm not. That's not how it works. And it's more about understanding, what do I need from you? What objectives are we trying to meet for this client or for this project? And then go and do it. Like, that's kind of, whatever. And I think it's not about, what do you need to fill this amount of time? It's more about, this is the role you need to fulfill for the company. And this is how it connects to the vision for the business. And this is how blah, 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 and it kind of maybe reshape the way we think about roles as well.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And I think when we're doing that too, that's better for the business because at the
mm,
end of the day, obviously, they're achieving the goals, and people are happy. We're supporting their lifestyle, that's important. But also I think, obviously you can have people in positions for like a year before you realize, hey, then the productivity isn't there or this isn't really
yeah,
working out. Whereas if you are focused more on the outcomes, you're gonna pick that stuff up earlier. And I think it will even change the way that you interview. So you are getting the right people
for
for the right
sure.
roles, and you are picking up if that isn't the right person earlier on and addressing it because you're more
Mm,
focused on the outcomes rather than, are they checking in at 9 o'clock? Are they checking out at 5 or longer, whatever it may be?
mm,
Are they online at this time? Like, if you're focused on that stuff, you may actually miss the point and you may
yeah.
actually lose someone who is highly productive, achieves all their goals, but just doesn't work in the way that we may traditionally want them to.
Yeah, and I really like that, because I think it also brings it back to, the mission of the company, which I do think gets forgotten a bit, especially the larger the company is. Like, I think sometimes you can just end up being a cog in a wheel, and it's almost like, all right, we need to fill that position. And it's kind of like, someone I think if someone really understood, like, why their role is important, what it's moving towards for the company, what's expected of them in their role rather than the amount of hours or whatever that's expected, that they would actually feel more connected and probably do a better job anyway, rather than it just being like, clock in, clock out, just got to get my salary, whatever. And I just think, yeah, maybe it is, again, we're kind of stuck in this industrial revolution, like productivity. The more hours you put in, the more things you can get off the belt or whatever. Um, and it's just maybe now looking more at, like, exactly that. What is the role, and who is the right person for that role? And then what are they bringing to the company, and, all of those sort of things. So I just think it's such an interesting topic. I'm a bit obsessed with it, to be honest. If you can't tell. And I just
Because
am
I
really
think it really
excited.
aligns with your business and it
It
really
does.
aligns with, like, what we are both interested, which is creating the lifestyle that you love and, the way that your workplace operates is really key to that. If you're in a
Yeah.
workplace that doesn't allow you to have the kind of lifestyle you want, then you're not going to be happy, are you?
No.
And that's not good for the business. It's not good for you. So I think it all kind of lines up really in terms of your business, what we're talking about, and really what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing like how it kind of grows and develops over the next couple of years, I guess. So yeah, really cool, really interesting. And yeah, I just hope that the world moves a bit forward towards, supporting people as individuals essentially rather than just cogs in a corporate wheel.
And I think just also seeing that I think the more you can step back, you actually see that you both have similar goals, whereas sometimes we're trying to force someone to achieve goals in the way that we think they should be achieved instead of recognizing the key is that we have the same goal. The key is that we're working towards the same goal. And the way that we achieve that is actually less important.
Yeah, yeah, I fully agree with that. Yeah, it's really interesting. I always chat to people about how they're approaching it because I know quite a few like leaders in business, and it's just so interesting. Everyone has such a different approach to this, but a lot of it always boils down to actually wanting to give people flexibility. They're just not sure exactly how that looks and like what it can entail. So I'm sure systems and solutions and businesses are going to pop
Mhm.
up about this over the
Uh,
next couple of years. But I just think it's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we combat this because it's not even just about women needing flexibility. All of these things are coming up now, like about how women's businesses are less funded. Like there's way less women that get funding for their companies. Obviously, there's a huge thing around childcare and how it's just so overpriced and it's just not worth women coming into work half the time. Um, and like obviously parental leave and just so many things are coming up now, which are great that they're being addressed. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing how this all kind of escalates and grows over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. It's those big societal issues. And I think the other thing that you highlighted is that change in the style of leadership that we have, because I think traditionally there was a lot of micromanagement. And if we're letting go of that micromanagement, not only is obviously good for the employee, but, in the context, but it's also really important for the leader because we talk a lot about having that time to plan and having that time to do all the things that we want to do in our own businesses. And I think that if you have a leadership team that is spending all of their time micromanaging, that doesn't free up much time to grow the business. So
Yeah.
if we can create
Mm,
good systems around accountability and we can individualize plans and then we can step back a little bit and have more time to actually dedicate to growing businesses, to
yeah.
planning things, and yeah, it just frees up a lot of time, doesn't it?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I just think, it is that. And I think if you think about most companies, I mean, obviously there's big corporates, but actually the founders, if you're looking at an SME, the founder tends to be quite involved in the company still. And they also have visions and dreams and a lifestyle
Mhm.
that they want to live. And I think your point is so valid in that actually by releasing them from all this managerial kind of stuff allows them exactly as you say to live life on their terms and to grow the business on their terms. So it's kind of a full circle that will hopefully make everyone a bit happier, a bit more productive and living life more on their terms. So fingers crossed this movement will be a positive one. Um,
Absolutely, for everyone all round.
yeah.
That's
But
a
yeah,
great
as
place to
usual,
end, isn't it?
yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this issues and like anything interesting that you come across about the topic. I would love to read. So yeah, if you want to pop us a message on Instagram about this, we'd love to hear from you.
Definitely, and I think also to hear, like, what's important to you in
Yeah,
creating the lifestyle you want, so, what's the ideal scenario in a workplace setting for you
love
to
that.
achieve those goals would be great to
Mm,
hear.
love it. All right. See you guys next week.
See you next week.
You're ready to create a life on your terms. Join us every week and make sure to like and subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes. All the links to keep in touch with us are in the bio.